So, Dave, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything has just come out.
Yep.
You know what the internet is saying about all that optional stuff?
Yep.
Do you have anything else to say on the matter?
Maybe.
All right, Dave, let's just talk about Death of the D&D Race with Tasha's Cauldron of Everything.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and as usual, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Looking for more D&D videos? Click that subscribe button and see all the D&D videos in your YouTube feed.
So you don't miss a single Nerdarchy video, like magic, attune to that notification bell.
But hey, do you want even more Nerdarchy? In your life, down in the description, you can find a link to Nerdarchy, the newsletter, where you can stay informed, get weekly D&D content delivered right to your inbox, as well as find out how to game with Nerdarchy. All right, so we're going to dive into Tasha's Cauldron to Everything once again, and there will be a link in the description if you want to get your Dead Trees copy. You can get it over on Amazon and help support the channel at the same time. So we are talking about Death of the D&D Race, Tasha's Cauldron to Everything. And what exactly do we mean? Tasha's introduces a lot of new optional rules.
Indeed. And we for this video, we're looking specifically at Chapter 1. We're looking at customizing your origins. And is the ability of swapping out so many things, is that removing, the concept of the race from the game? Yes, no? Let us know what your thoughts are, down in the comments below.
Yeah, so, what exactly does this mean? What can you do with Tasha's? What are the ramifications on the game itself? So, first of all, we get some customization. Ability stat bonuses no longer matter. They are meaningless, drivel. Each race assigns a certain amount of pluses, put them wherever you want. That's not how it's worded, but that's essentially what it comes down to. If you're playing a mountain dwarf and you get a +2 to strength and con, well, you don't have to do that. As long as you're using these optional rules, you could put them in two different abilities. You could be charisma and dex if you want. You can make it however you want it to do, as long as you don't change up like the numbers, and you can't put them in the same stat. But other than that, like, you've got 6 stats, however many adjustments you get, do what you want with them.
Yeah, the exact wording is, if you like your character to follow their own path, you may ignore your ability score increase trait and assign ability score increases tailored to your character. Here's how to do it. Take your ability score increases you gain in your race and subrace and apply it to an ability score of your choice. If you gain more than one increase, you can't apply those abilities to the same ability score, and you can't increase the score above 20. For example, if the ability score increase trait for your race or subrace increases your constitution by 2 and your wisdom by 1, you could instead increase your intelligence by 2 and your charisma by 1. So it does remove that option, and there's a lot of talk on both sides of the the fence, if you will, about this, of like, oh, well, I want to play a goblin wizard. Well, goblins don't typically get a bonus to intelligence, so in order to play something that's more fun and interesting, you wind up having to, sacrifice uniqueness for, the not as good, at that particular, class as, say, an elven wizard or a high elven wizard. So there are some people like, oh, I love this because now I can play an ideally made character with a fun and unique race. And there's others who say, oh my god, this is breaking the game because, now I don't have to choose the race, and all those things that are fun and interesting and make the game diverse now have the ability to be just as good, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's breaking the game. That's a bit too far. That's a stretch too far.
I'm not saying that's my words. I'm saying that's what I've seen.
I understand. Online. But like, here's the thing, right? We used to make a lot of builds that we called our unorthodox character builds because they didn't have all the optimized things in the optimized place. And we found like those are the things that made those characters interesting. because you went to play something that was against type. Well, against type doesn't exist anymore. Everything is type right now,
Right.
because everyone can have the maximum score. And when as they add more things to the games, it's like, here's a thing to use that score in other ways. So you don't have to use your not best score to do the thing. It's like, when do we get to the point where we chuck all the stats and say we just have one good stat and that's all we use?
So there's a lot to unpack there, Dave. Number one, this is an option. So a lot of things, as Wizards puts out new material, this is presented as, if it's not right for your party, don't play with it that way. Not every table is going to want to use these custom options. Not everybody's going to want to say, I want my goblin to be able to be really good at an intelligence and charisma. That's not your thing. Fine. At your table, don't use those features and continue playing D&D, the game that you love, the game that you've been playing, and all's happy hunky-dory. But if you are interested in those unorthodox things and you want your character to be optimized at the same time, and your DM's cool with it, then
but they're not unorthodox anymore.
Well,
so, the way we were using it.
Right, but that concept is still there. I mean, it's going to take a long time for people to see the concept of, this thing being that is weird, because they're not used to seeing goblins with that, bonus to intelligence, or, seeing dwarves with a bonus to dex. Like, whatever it is that you choose to do, we all know in the real world, everybody is good at something different. Humans can be dexterous or intelligent, charming, whatever. They cover the entire spectrum. So why can't D&D races or origins fall in the same venue? All right, you're not as charming and intelligent as someone of your race, but you know what? You might be hardier and stronger, and that's just fine.
So, and it's true, like that works very much so. Again, it just comes back to the everything seems samey, and I feel the same way, like when classes start letting you use your other stats to do things as well. It's as if choices no longer really matter. So why even have so many in the game? But I'll stop ranting on that. I mean, is it game breaking? No, but it is kind of like, okay, like, why even have races to begin with? We can just say they are whatever they are and just give them the most optimized builds for that thing. It becomes a min-maxer's playground for sure. That's what I kind of see it as.
Well, there's definitely that line of thinking. There's definitely people who are seeing it in that direction. But we've gamed with, there's definitely a line of thinking like that, and we've had the pleasure of gaming with a lot of great people who feel that there's nothing that say you can't power game and role play at the same time. And I feel like there's nothing stopping me from being a good role player if I have an optimized character. So if you're looking to play that way, I'm for it. I have no issues with it. Are all of my characters going to go in that direction? Probably not. But you've got the ability to be like, oh well, I can now put the stats where I best want them. So you can start off with having 2 16s where you want them if you're using the base stat array, and your character is the character you really want them, regardless of what race you started with.
Well, we will see how it starts playing out at our tables for sure. If people leave the stats where they are, or if everyone moves them to get 2 16s. I'm kind of leaning towards the latter. So languages is no big deal. It's like, you don't like the languages you start with, swap them out to whatever, and it's a 1-for-1. Definitely, that's rather small and insignificant. That is something, just as a GM, I would have done anyway.
With this, we've seen examples in our own home games where, again, I would agree with Dave. If somebody had asked, I would absolutely allow it. It's a scenario where sometimes, like, the languages just don't make sense. And, if you are a race and you weren't raised by your culture, then perhaps you don't know your given language. And that could be a fun role-playing thing to go along with. So I'm down for that. The next section is where I think, there's a lot of, just as much angst and discussion about the ability score increase, and that's the ability to swap out proficiencies. Now, there's a list, skill for a skill. If you swap out an armor, you get a simpler martial weapon or a tool. Simple weapon can give you a different simple weapon or a tool. A martial weapon can give you a different simpler martial weapon or a tool. And then tool gives you access to either a different tool proficiency or a simple weapon. And, with this list, skill for a skill, even across the board. When you start getting into the other stuff, this is where you look at what you're getting from your race, or from your origin, and people are like, oh my word. So the craziness here. Now, looking at, the adventures. Now, our games, definitely differ from, what we've seen online. We like tools. We try to find ways to use tools in our game. I'm currently playing an artificer in Dave's game, and I do look for, how does my knowledge of leatherworking tools or tinker's tools apply to this monster, this trap, this thing here? When you ask those kinds of questions, it can come up. But beyond, typically thieves' tools, there's not a whole lot of support for using tools in games. It's definitely more a, unique to your table scenario. But trading out those things, is it that big of a deal? All right. Does your character really have a reason for why they didn't do what what your given origin would typically do? Oh yeah, I didn't bother studying war and weapon play with my my fellow kinsmen. I went and did this other thing instead. Well, how does that tailor to your background? How does the change that you're making here affect your character? Now, maybe you didn't do those things and you eventually decided, oh, well, I really missed that aspect of my life and I went and sought training later, but I feel like I'm behind all of my brethren. So, it can inform your role playing. It can inform your choices if you're actually going to look at those aspects. But, I really think that, I got no problem with the swapping. I encourage you that if you're going to do those things, to look at the RP of why your character made those choices and what is that going to mean for them, down the road and how they interact with their people.
So I just know how players are, right? Now, I will say this by saying it actually won't matter in the game. It really won't make a difference. But I just feel like a lot of players are like, just give me more stuff. So, the way you described it happening isn't the way I see it's going to happen. It's like, oh, I'm playing a dwarf. Yes, I very much had this martial upbringing, but I don't actually need these proficiencies from being a dwarf anymore because I'm a fighter and I get them already. But I'm going to take these and trade them all for tool proficiencies. At the end of the day, the character now has, 6 tool proficiencies they wouldn't have had otherwise. It's not going to break anybody's game. But they may come up with the backstory as to why that is that way. But I don't really feel like that's going to be why a lot of players do it. Some will, many will. But then you might also have the player that's like, I'm a dwarven wizard, I'm a mountain dwarf, and I moved my, bonus to strength into my intelligence, and I actually did not partake in any of the martial training, and I just have all these extra skills as a wizard, and I know how to do things, and I work with my hands or use musical instruments or whatever. So that could happen as well. Again, these don't matter because mechanically they don't really add many benefits to the game unless your GM gives you lots of opportunities to use them, and your game, it kind of revolves and focuses around more using tools. So it's not going to matter.
And to those kind of people, if that makes you happy and your DM is allowing these options, then by all means have fun with it. I know there's definitely an aspect of myself that sees that and has, over the years definitely all right, well, playing a dwarven fighter, especially a mountain dwarf fighter, kind of stinks because I've got all these things that overlap, and technically I feel like I should be compensated in some way, shape, or form. So the other thing that it talks about, with the origins is the custom lineage. which, Dave and I have discussed, kind of off air, that it's kind of weak sauce. If like you want to just create a race on the fly, you're a humanoid, you're small or medium, your choice. Your base walking speed is 30 feet. You pick one ability score of your choice that increases by 2. You gain a feat of your choice. You gain a variable trait, so you either have a dark vision with a range of 60 feet or proficiency in a skill of your choice. And then you can read and write common and one other language of your choice, and your DM agrees that it's appropriate for your character. So you're not even getting the typical +3.
The difference is the variant human gets 2 +1s wherever they want. Most people, not all, but many people that I've seen at the table will then take a feat that's a half feat. So they get something cool from their feat, but then they get another +1, giving them a +3, which you could do here. And then you're going to have dark vision or a skill. So, yeah, essentially you're a variant human.
Yeah, I mean, unless like you take this one and be like, all right, I'm going to take, the prodigy that's going to give me, a skill and a language, and expertise.
You couldn't take that one because you're not a human.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Technically.
So I don't know, man. I look at this and I would not choose this option. There are too many other great,
also
too many other great choices out there.
Also, Prodigy does not give you stat adjustments. So
true.
So you'd be missing out there as well. Whatever. If someone wants to use this, they can. I think it is a much weaker choice than almost any race in the game. It is kind of it's basically like another version of the variant human, in my opinion.
So, I mean, I guess you could take this if you wanted to claim that you're insert X race here, so that you're just like them, you speak their language, but you get access to a feat at first level. You're not going to gain all the other racial traits. You might be able to, qualify with some of them with either dark vision or a skill, but it's blasé at best, in my opinion. I'm sorry, Watts. Usually I love all the stuff that you say, but for this one, I'm not going to go down that road.
So next up is when we are able to get an ability stat increasement, we can also change out a skill. We can forget a skill we know and learn a new one. And, maybe it wasn't useful. It didn't come up as much as you thought. You're not using it. Maybe you explain it as, my character just hasn't practiced doing this thing in a long time, but he's been doing this other thing instead. So, you become rusty and not good at the other thing. And now you know how to do this other thing. But yeah, it's an option, changing your skills basically every 4th level or so, even more often, I guess, if you're a fighter or a rogue.
This is something that, again, I think this is, if presented by a character in my game, they wanted to do this, I wouldn't even make you wait for, an ASI. I would just say, go ahead and switch it, as long as it would be something that your character would have access to based on, race and class, type scenario, background and class, whatever have you. If you could have gotten it and you want to swap it out, sure. Anytime, mid-session, at a level, whatever, go ahead and do it. To me, this is not game-breaking at all.
Yeah, I mean, we would have done this kind of stuff in our own games anyway. So for that reason, it's really not that big a deal unless a player becomes obnoxious with it.
Yeah.
With this kind of stuff. And then you're like, okay, just make a decision already. So that's fine. So next is changing your subclasses.
All right. So I have to say, this is one that kind of threw me for a loop.
It's extreme, right?
Yeah. I mean, not like, holy crap, but I mean, we've played games where, characters have, to use the term that some of you might know, like they've respec'd their character, changed around levels, changed around other features. It's something that we've done. And literally I had a character in Dave's game that I did change a subclass, in between sessions because something else that came out and it felt a little bit more fitting and felt, more fun for what I wanted to do. So this has been done, just was done off screen. But this is basically, hey, something's come up and you want to change your subclass and, you want to do it. And it gives you options of, what kind of time frame does it take, or if it's done over the course of, a sudden change, there's several different like story options as to how it could have come up. So like, I fell under a special fey tree, and now my wizard has divination powers instead of enchanter powers. Okay, whatever, you've gone ahead and done it. I don't think it's a big deal, but it's definitely,
There's some that are definitely more plausible than others. Like any of the cleric domains, like if you switch gods, that would make sense that you would get a domain. Swapping warlock packs is another area where I feel like it does kind of make sense. Paladin Oaths is another place where it's really easy. Some of the other ones are a little weirder. With the sudden change where there's something that happens that explains the change, where it's outside circumstances and it's usually kind of like magical in nature. Sure. The retraining for those things becomes a little weirder. Like you're switching from the totem barbarian to a berserker or some other kind of barbarian seems like a big change. But again, they give you the rules for doing it. If it's something you want to do in your game, it's definitely an option. And like we said, we've made these changes in our own games. It's like, a new UA came out and like we felt like that fitted the character better than what our options were before. So us as GMs we're usually like, if you want to make that change, go ahead. It's just mainly because they just didn't have that option before.
When you look at the character class, ultimately, as long as you've got the thing out there, I'm cool with you playing whatever, as long as that character is still that character, and I don't need to rewrite a new character into the story. I don't care. We're gonna have fun together because that's what this game is. We're meant to go role play, have fun, and roll funny shaped dice, and occasionally talk in weird voices. Like everything else, that's we'll figure the rest out later. That's how we tend to roll these days. So options are options, and I'm cool with what's here, and I don't have anything from this section that I wouldn't allow at my team.
Yeah, I mean, I feel a certain way about the ability scores for the most part, but at the same time, I would also allow it in my game. To me, it's just weird, and I guess there's just a part of me. It's like when you're building your character and you're playing the game, I feel like all the choices you make should mean something and matter. And it just seems like we're getting more and more away from that. It's like, hey, Wizards of the Coast, you want to do a classless, raceless system? Just make that then. Or I guess you give us the options and we'll play that way in D&D. But I mean, what are you guys doing? How do you feel about it? Are you using it? Will you allow it? Will you not allow it? And do you want to see us talk about Tasha's Cauldron of Everything some more? Because we have an overview video you can check out up here.
If more D&D options are what you're after, we're creating products for players and DMs alike over on our Patreon for 5e. Come check us out.
But that's not all we do. We do monthly fan games, monthly giveaways, which our patrons are automatically entered in, and more.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.